Look, obviously, Madonna is a huge, huge part of my book. The title is Like a Love Story, which for anyone who, doesn't know is an homage to her two biggest albums of the 80s, Like a Virgin and Like a Prayer. It wasn't my plan to have Madonna be such a big part of the book, but as I started writing it, I realized that, a book that I thought was going to be an exploration of my fear and my shame growing up became that, yes, that, but it also became this kind of hopeful thank you to all of the activists and the artists and the mentors who helped me eventually overcome that fear and that shame. And as I was writing it, it became very clear to me that pop culture and art was a huge part of that. In particular, in my case, Madonna, although the book pays homage to many, many more. There's a lot of James Baldwin, a lot of Judy Garland. But Madonna, for me, I was from a Middle Eastern, relatively conservative family. I wasn't exposed to queer art growing up. I didn't have access to what was happening in the queer underground, but I was a massive Madonna fan. I went to the Virgin tour in Toronto in 80. I mean, God, I was 8 years old in the early 80s. And she became a part of our family because I was such a huge fan. And so when she started to become so overt in her, exploration of queer sexuality, and so she was just so outspoken in a way that nobody in the mainstream, nobody who had the ears of, teenagers and preteens was speaking that way. It had a massive impact on me. And I know, before writing this book, and certainly from the response of this book, that many men of my generation feel the same way. Like Madonna was the first voice we heard that was supporting us, that was taking the shame away, that was educating us about HIV and AIDS, with no stigma about sexuality, which was huge. So yeah, I guess like it was important to me as I was writing this book that became this thank you note to make sure to thank her and all the other artists who exposed me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like, there's so many. When I was growing up, I mean, you might not sort of have the language for it, but you certainly knew something was different about you. And so for myself, there were certain larger than life personalities I think that I gravitated towards, and there was something about them in their over the topness, like Cher or or Madonna or any of these kind of larger than life personalities that seemed to be able to have no hesitation in expressing who they were, or not to be afraid of anyone's judgment. And I think that's what for me really resonates, certainly with like the Madonnas and the Chers and the other sort of gay icons of the world, is that they are not they don't seem to really care about what the world thinks. I'm sure they do, like they're human beings after all. But like, even it's been interesting for me to sort of watch the Lady Gaga thing happen, because like I know if I was 20 and Lady Gaga, like I would be like, I still really like Lady Gaga, don't get me wrong, but I know I'm a little like, I'm not quite, she's for that generation that's a bit younger, but I still love her music. But I just know that if I was at the club and the Lady Gaga song came on, I would just be, I'm sure the club just goes crazy. So I think that I can appreciate and also recognize the things that are passing through the generations too, which is nice. Like I feel it makes me feel more connected to that younger generation. And I'm always fascinated to know, like, with the younger generation, like, do they have the same cultural touchstones that we have? Like, I wonder, I really am curious to know if 90s dance music sounds dated to a younger generation, because to me it doesn't, right? But then I'm thinking in my head, does this sound like 60s music sounds to me, right? When you hear that kind of, those that type of music. And so for me, it's always interesting to see sort of what's carried on. So does the younger generation know who Karen Black and Airplane was, right? Or sort of that Airport 1975 movie, like the same things that have sort of carried on. I do find that they can connect the generations. And listen, I was 21 when RuPaul came on the scene with Supermodel, and like what a revelation like RuPaul was at that time. And to know that RuPaul is still around and bigger than ever, but I feel more connected to that Drag Race audience in a lot of ways, because I feel like I was there when RuPaul sort of first emerged on the scene as a singing sensation.
I almost wonder if the Drag Race queens have become those cultural icons for today's youth in a certain way. It's like it's a whole, superstardom in a different, I don't know, because social media obviously impacts it to such a different degree, but yeah, that's an interesting thought though, for sure.
But the Drag Race queens, are often educating young people about the past. I mean, if you think about the Snatch Game and Drag Race,
Yeah, that's
they're
true. Yeah.
they're often doing Joan Crawford or my personal favorite, Little Edie from Grey Gardens, which is not exactly a cultural touchstone for millennials, but I think that's the beauty. Like I remember being a Madonna fan, and then through Madonna, I discovered Marlene Dietrich and Marilyn Monroe and Keith Haring, all these artists that she was drawing from. And I think similarly, like Lady Gaga's new album clearly draws from 90s house
Hmm.
music. And hopefully young people are going back, or an artist like Lana Del Rey is clearly playing off of Joni Mitchell and Laurel Canyon scene. I think young people probably go and explore the past because there's a line from the past to the present. I'm now quoting Grey Gardens, but but I love that line. Like to me, that line between the past and the present makes me feel like I always existed through history. And I think anytime we can latch on to ourselves through history, for me, it makes me feel better.
In terms of the isolation, like I think I grew up um, being somewhat self-conscious of the things that I liked, the music that I was interested in. Like I sort of hid the George Michael stuff, I hid the Madonna stuff because it wasn't kind of the acceptable music, especially for a young male to listen to, right? Because you were going to draw suspicions about yourself if you appeared to be too big of a Madonna fan. So I hid it for so long, and then when I started to come out, and I'd see like, the George Michael "Listen Without Prejudice" CD, and all these in the CD collection of all these other people that I was meeting, it just was this moment of like, you listen to this too. Like I almost wore this cassette tape out, and it's in your collection too. And it's that moment where you realize that so many of us were listening to the same things, we're being influenced by the same things, but we just didn't realize it at the time, or we weren't given permission in a lot of ways to kind of be open about what we like to do. And so for me, it's often therapeutic, and it makes me feel less alone when I'm able to share these things even 30 years after the fact, to talk about how much I love Madonna, and to not feel any kind of like, I don't know, just some sort of stigma associated with it, like I did when I was 16 years old.
You know what's funny though? I will let you get to your next question, but I mean, coming from a Iranian family and being shielded, like I didn't know what gay culture was until much later. So I mean, I didn't know to hide my Madonna obsession. My walls were covered in pictures. My other obsessions were Joan Crawford, Judy Garland, Rita Hayworth. I mean, my walls were covered in old black and white photos of old like female movie stars. I had no idea until much later that these were part of gay culture. And it's something the book talks about, but it's like it's almost like this secret language that we find. It's like a pre-verbal thing. Like I didn't have a language for being gay or for you know what it meant, but I knew that when I watched a Judy Garland movie, something was being transmitted to me, and that's just fascinating.